right, folks. Get back up here to the beginning. Apologies. So let's talk about empirical and projective assessments, right? So hopefully you've done some of those. Granted, we had to find the free versions online of many of those tests, but the free versions of some of the personality tests. So we want to look at the two different types of assessments, right? Projective and empirical. So you can check that out at your own time. And in class, we would have done this. And if you're in maybe next week, you'll have an opportunity to do a Rorschach ink blot test. Okay. This is an example of a projective assessment. So what we look for in a projective assessment is they're going to be more projecting what the patient or person in question thinks, sees, feels, interprets, and so on. So with these projected assessments, there's a lot less hard fact, right? There's a lot less factor analysis. There's a lot less observation. However, there is some. So when you do this Rorschach ink blot test, okay, one of the key factors in taking this test is not necessarily your answers or what you see in the random blots. One of the key factors is your personal behavior while you're doing it, how you answer the questions, the eye contact you make, the time it takes, all that kind of stuff. So it all gets thrown in there. So there is a little bit of observation and data to it, but also a lot of it is that interpretive piece. What do you see and why, and what does it make sense to you? And then it can be graded out to test your personality and can often be used, dangerously sometimes as a measure to look for psychosis and some other disorders. Okay. So that's what projective tests are. Another projective test is this thematic apperception test, in which you're given this image, right? And you have to create a narrative to explain it. So there is really no right answer, but they'll start to look at different factors of your personality and your understanding and your character and your morality as to why you explain things in the way that you do. And if you remember from the video, the gentleman down there, Henry Murray, was that army man that went to Germany and learned from the Nazis on how to test for personality to be able to make your soldiers better, get better leaders and all that kind of stuff, right? That's where this assessment came out of. Then we get into more empirical tests. So empirical tests are going to use data-based initiatives like a factor analysis, for instance, and or hard observations where we literally have either video or record of behaviors taking place in certain environments. Okay, so that's the difference between it. Projective, kind of thoughts, opinions, feelings. Empirical, we've got data, we've got material that we can base our assumptions off of. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, much like the Myers-Briggs and a few others, are pretty long, in-depth questionnaires that, depending on answers, will code the answers into typecasts for personalities. And they look something like this, right? The scales. So depending on how you answer it and where your levels fall, you look at different types of hysteria, depression, masculinity, femininity. So you're looking at your sexuality, paranoia, all those different types of things. Okay. So when we go through this is kind of how it works. So each question is going to be, or a bulk of questions will be tied to these different scales. And then how you answer it will determine different point values and the total amount of points that you kind of have in each one show the strength of those different characteristics in your personality. Okay. And in there, they also have checks, right? Validity checks to make sure that people aren't, blowing through the test too fast, or they're not trying to answer it in a certain way. Okay. So that in there, they use this coding that based on the different questions, depending on how they're answering, you can also figure out that people may be faking trying to be good or faking trying to be bad. And then what is that? How do we interpret their personality based on those facts? Okay, so that's just a little bit about those tests that you are taking and how they work. I'm sure some of you have probably taken things like a Myers-Briggs before over your school career. All of them are a little bit different in their ways of assessing personality and needs and learning and stuff like that. But that's the difference. Projective is going to be your thoughts, feelings, emotions, and empirical tests are much more data driven, observational based scales. Okay.